Good evening. I'm on a little bit early. I did sort of mention that I would probably come on about 9:45 p.m. I think it's about 9:30. So I'm just going to see if anyone's going to join me because I think it's quite an important topic I want to speak to tonight. And I'm just going to hang on to see if anyone comes along, but this is a subject that I really want to speak to because I have had 3 clients today with a hell of a lot going on, and I know that there is so much going on in families at the moment. So I'm just gonna wait a second, just see if anyone else comes on. And to my client, I said I would call back today, and I haven't done yet. I have been incredibly busy today, like seriously busy. Probably the busiest day of the year today. And what's becoming really, really clear is that many families are in crisis. And I've seen, like, literally, like, sort of, I've witnessed it. I'm witnessing it constantly, and this is what I want to say. It's not showing me who's on tonight, so I'm sure the right people will be hearing this. And if you know any family that is in crisis over what I'm going to talk about, then please do share this video. And please let me know where you're listening from, because I know I get a lot of my usual followers listening to what I say and sharing. But if you're somebody, you know, I often, like, I'm in town or I'm in the woods or something, and people seem to know everything I've said, and yet I don't know who they are. So it's nice. It's really nice if you just let me know if you don't usually watch, where you're listening from. That'd be really cool. So something really big. Hi, Wendy. It's telling me Wendy's watching anyway. It says there's 4 or 5 people watching at the moment, but it's only telling me Wendy. So hi. So this is basically what is happening at the moment. There are some families that are all awake. And if you are somebody, I have got a handful of people still on my Facebook wall who have completely opposing views to myself. One is my second cousin. You won't know who she is. She's my second cousin. And about another 4 or 5 are people that I have known for, over 40 years. People I've been to school with, people I've done music with, people, some of them who I respect, and some of them who are old school friends that I don't really know anymore. But I haven't blocked those people from my wall, purely because I think it's good to have a few people in there to hear, what's being said, because I haven't really got a clue what's being said outside of those who are awake to what's going on. But what I see are my clients and my loved ones and everyone around me, and so many people reaching out to me here, and also obviously on the Awakened groups. But today I've had it really put in my face with 3 clients, and one, literally, I was there as she was going through something major. And this is what it is. There are families who are all awake. Let's call it that. Let's say that. And then there are families, and I'm sure that you all know families who are all asleep. In other words, they all are trusting in the governments and what they're saying, and they're believing everything that the government are telling them and what the TV's telling them. But then there are the families, and this is a lot of us. So a lot of you, I'm sure, will resonate at some level. And some of you, when you are ready, or when you think you're not quite ready, are going to come to crunch time. And although everyone is talking about compassion and not allowing this division to happen within families, what's happening big time is that for somebody who newly awakens and starts to see the world for what it is. In other words, the veil of illusion that I have talked about in my yoga practice, as has every other yogi, the veil of illusion starts to become thinner as we start to see reality. Now, I know that in previous posts I've talked about yoga teachers, Pilates teachers buying into the narrative, and it has happened hugely because actually only 90% of the population are asleep. Only 10% of the population are actually awakened. Now, when I had a spiritual teacher about 20 years ago, my spiritual teacher told me then that I was in the 1% of awakened souls, if you like. 1%. And I was quite shocked when I was told that. 20 years on, you and I are one of the 10% that is awakened. And 10% is a number that I've seen written a lot. It's kind of growing. But whereas before I was in the 1%, now I'm in the 10% of us who are awake to what's going on. Now, the issue is starting to happen when one member of the family wakes up and the others don't. And what's happening is it's causing a huge amount of crisis within families. I've literally been working with 3 families today who are in crisis. One I was actually witness to, like the conversation and everything. And I'm just going to give you a little insight into what happened with my knowledge, because everything I share, everything I speak about is always my own experience. I don't go off and, Pilates, obviously I studied and then I created the way I taught it based on everything I'd learned. So it's all intuitive. And everything that I share with you is coming through my own life experience. But about 20 years ago, I had a really good friend, and her best friend knew all about common law. And this is just as an example. So this girl knew all about common law. In fact, she knew it so well that she didn't pay her poll tax. I think it was called community charge in those days. She didn't pay her parking fines. And she knew the system based on common law. The maritime law. I think everyone's talking about common law now. In fact, a new friend I met up with for coffee today went on a course yesterday to do a whole 1-day course on common law. And if you're interested, please ask me and I can put you in touch with the right people, because once you've done that training, you can then train as a peace constable. A peace constable. Isn't that lovely? I don't want to go off track. So this friend knew all about common law, but this was 20 years ago. And she told me an awful lot about common law, but the things I remembered was that when they have capital letters and, when they call you Mr., Mrs., Ms., which I've never bought into, what happens is from the moment you're born, you're handing over, you get a birth certificate and you're handed over as a person, and you're actually someone who's now owned by the government. And there's a whole load of things that you can learn about this. And people are talking about common law because actually the law I don't even want to talk about it because I haven't studied it lately, and I'm going to go and do this course. But basically this girl who knew everything about it and was very passionate and very highly intelligent, she ended up being sectioned. And you can understand this if you're the one in your family who's really having a lot of crisis at the moment in your family. You will understand the feeling like you are going mad, because your family will think you are mad. And it's a really, really difficult place for you to be in. I really, really get that, because I have had personally a long time, I've had decades of this experience of trying to fit back into society. And I'm sure many of you will know exactly what I mean. But for those people who are suddenly, or I say suddenly, but those people who are suddenly the pen is dropping and realising what's going on, not only have you got to deal with your family members thinking you're crazy, and I also want to bring in the 16-year-olds here, because there are people now who are, take for example, a mother, or another client was a father actually, with a whole family, 3 children and a wife, who think he's absolutely crazy because he's not having the VAX thing. Then there are people who are, so you've got the 16-year-olds, you've got the people whose whole family, and then you've got the husband and wife. So many people are separating over this because, and I'm not even putting it down to differences of opinions. It's not a difference of opinion. It's like, when you can see, when you wake up, as you wake up, there's no going back. There's no going back. Now, 20 years ago, my friend, who was thought of as crazy and who ended up being sectioned, because you can imagine when you know what's going on. I mean, many of you may have seen those Walt Disney, you know, when they slowed down the Walt Disney films, and they showed by each section of that Walt Disney film, they showed the pornography, the sex, the vile pornography that was going into the subconscious minds of the children. When you realise that everything that you understand is simply, and you've only got to look at the language of, you know, you're being stood under, you are underneath someone standing on you. When you wake up and realise that everything that you have been told has been a lie. And just go on the common law training, because I'm telling you guys, I haven't done it yet, but I was talking to a woman today. It's mind blowing. When you start to wake up and your family don't, you're gonna meet, many of you are meeting serious crisis points where you are so in disbelief that your family can't see what you can see. I'm used to it. I've you know, this has been my whole life, and this is why I realise that many of us who are creating lives that have got now the space, I've now got the space to hold this for those people who are waking up and those people who want to go deeper into the ascension process, because I have now created the space in my life. I'm 60 years old. I've had an amazing career. I've worked with thousands of people all over the world. And many of you who are younger already knew that you came here to do this. Like all of us who are standing in our truth and standing in our power and being called conspiracy theorists. I mean, I'll give you an example. I am now getting blamed by lots of people's families for the reason that their family members are behaving strange and belonging to part of some conspiracy theorist group. We're in a cult. So I'm now having to hold the energy of the blame for lots and lots of people and lots of families. So we've all got our place in this, but when you really are awake to what's going on, when you really know, and I'm not talking about knowing because, you know, have you noticed a lot of intelligent people who have got money are buying into the agenda? It's not their fault. It's how they've been conditioned and programmed with money and what they believe is intelligence, but actually the true natural laws of intelligence. You don't need to have the capacity to know stuff, because this is left brain, feminine intuition. This is heart stuff. You know, if you want to really break it down, this is a war between light and dark, between masculine and feminine. This is a spiritual war. So I've seen some shocking sights today. I've heard some shocking conversations. I've dealt today with people who are on the verge of just wanting to run away. And it's, what I really want to say, I guess, is it's our role as we start to ascend. It's our role for us to hold space for those who are not awake without the need to be right and for them to be wrong. And that is the next level, because once you are awake, you can scream and shout at your family and be upset as much as you like. You can try everything in your power, like I did with my boys, to try and let them know. You send them videos, you send them information, you tell them to look on the government website, do this, you do that. But the thing is, if somebody is not ready to wake up, there comes a point, and this is really kind of the crux of what I wanted to say tonight, is when you are in crisis, as I have been many, many times in my life. And at the end of this, I will share the little addiction that came back to me for a couple of weeks that I've knocked on the head today, because I'm back in alignment. I'll just finish with that. But when you are at that breaking point, when you're in crisis, when your family feels like you have nothing left in common anymore, when you get to that point, you have to allow yourself to really connect to your spiritual self. If you know families who have never had any crisis in their lives and nothing's ever really happened too much, unless they're really, really awake and here just to hold very high energy, they probably haven't had anything happen because they're not ready for it. They're not ready. Their souls are not mature enough, if you like. They haven't been here enough times to really to be really ready to ascend. And so when you have crisis in your life, somehow you get through it. Somehow you don't die unless you kill yourself. Like when there's crisis, when there's that point, there's always where it's charged, okay? The only thing I can say to you, if you're experiencing this kind of crisis right now in your family, is to really understand that you came here with a soul contract. You came here to experience living in the third dimension in a physical body. You literally dropped into your body. And it's really important that you understand that. Because if you're the mother of a 16-year-old child and all your children have been jabbed, but your 16-year-old child, and I witnessed it today, the 16-year-olds today are literally getting, the ones that haven't been vaccinated yet, the 16-year-olds are literally getting about 4 or 5 texts a day. They're getting messages and emails telling them, listen to this, they're getting messages telling them that the VAX has now been approved as safe. They are getting coerced and manipulated to a degree that if you're not experiencing this particular scenario, you would hardly believe. And so there are mothers literally on the verge of breakdown. Mothers who are awake. There are fathers watching their children, and I'm talking about children from the age of 18 to 30, if you like, young people, who are having to deal with their wife and their 3 children, who are all taken 2 jabs, and they are trying to keep the family unit together. They're trying to keep the family unit together. Now, if you're awake, you're watching the footage of what's going on all over the world. You're watching Romania, you're watching Australia, you're watching Denmark, you're watching Australia, and you're watching the tyranny that is playing out. You're watching the statistics. One particular woman today had actually been on the government website, and it took her an hour to get all of the information from the government website about how many people had died and how many people had had side effects, serious side effects from the yellow card system, which they reckon only 1% of people are even, 10% of people are even putting out. Most people have not even heard of the yellow card system. Did you know that? That most people who are asleep have not even heard of the yellow card system. They're just constantly listening to the programming and the brainwashing that is being pumped out by the mainstream media. So the only way, if I'm speaking to you, the only way that you are going to deal with this crisis, and it's a really hard pill to swallow, because being awake actually requires a certain amount of your spirit and your soul and your becoming who you really are. And you'll see that many of the people who are not awake yet are very much living in the third dimension. It's not their fault. They're not ready to wake up yet. So you have to take the higher stance and remember that they came here with free will. Now, it was hard enough for me with kids in their 30s. And those are adult men. And it was fucking heartbreaking for me. And it's been heartbreaking for all of my friends who have adult children. And even those who are going to become grandparents who are going through the same issues. It's been heartbreaking. But the majority of my friends are pretty awake. And I've seen myself personally coaching all my friends and all my family that are awake, which is actually only sort of 1.5 people in my whole extended family. When I say half a person, sometimes people have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and they choose, or they have such busy lives that they don't have the time to do the research that those of us who have now created space in our lives have had the time to do the research, or have had the we've been awake for a very long time, and we've seen what's happening, and we've had enough crisis in our lives to know how to deal with it and how to call upon spirit and higher, the quantum field, if you like, to support us and to hold us. Because as human beings, when we come to this kind of point in our lives where I don't ever remember anything like, I've been through massive crisis before, but there has never been anything like this. When I told you about my friend from 20 years ago who literally had a psychotic attack, she was sectioned because what she knew, nobody else could see, nobody else knew. She was so awake 20 years ago that people used to get called crazy and mad. Of course, we still do. But 20 years ago, when only 1% of the population was awake, and you were out there fighting for this and trying to make people see, and knowing common law like the back of your hand, so you did get away with not having to do any of this stuff that human beings have to do the minute we sign away our lives to our birth certificates and the whole common law thing. Once you start to put the pieces together and actually realise what is actually happening on this earth plane with humans, it will fucking blow your mind. It will fucking blow your mind. Go and do the common law training as a starter to realise how controlled humans have been for so many thousands of years. In particular, hundreds of years. But, we're talking civilizations here. We're talking about a massive, massive, massive awakening on the planet. And it's only going to last as long as we keep this fighting. Yeah, this separation. We're not going to go through the awakening. If any of you listen to Laurie Ladd, amazing woman, she talks an awful lot about the other dimensions and about the awakening. I'm sure you probably know her. And then of course you've got people who are awake to what's going on and calling us, spiritual weirdos and spiritual bypassing. There are so many sections and so many people and so many divides. It's just crazy right now. So the way you deal with it is you step out of that, you step away from it, because actually this is what the awakening is all about. This is what awakening actually is all about. It's realizing that 90% of the population are so enmeshed and engrossed in the third dimension of just working out lists and money and how I'm going to pay that bill, or just buying loads of stuff, you know, just earning loads and loads of money, working long hours and just spending, and actually avoiding their own true heart, their own feelings, their own knowings, their third eye, their you know, connection to God, to the divine. It's so easy in the third dimensional because we have been programmed to be this way. You know, I knew when I was 5 or 6, I was doing things with boys at the age of 5 or 6, and then this terrible shame came over me, you know, from about the age of 10 or 11, this dreadful shame around sex and sexuality, and then just navigating through that. I know for a fact teenage girls, young ladies, young women are doing things sexually at that young age that is all based around the shadow side of sex. And it's really fucking sad and disturbing to know what young girls are doing with guys, and the amount of guys that are, you know, they're doing all this grooming on online. And you know, society is fucking sick from the root, from the inside out. It's sick. You know, I could see that so long ago. And for me personally, in the end, I believe that's why I went down the road of that I did. You know, I was sort of smoking dog ends off the streets of King's Cross in Sydney, Australia, with my punk husband, and eating in the soup kitchens with the tramps, because I needed to experience that side of life. You know, I knew it wasn't me. The only way that you can step away from crisis is to step out of the story, out of the drama, and watch it. And it's your higher self. It's the part of you that knows. It's the part of you that has all the information about who you are. It is you. You are divine light. You are created by God, by the Creator. You know, too many light workers don't even know they're light workers yet. You know, as you wake up, there is so much light, but in order to hold that light and pull it in, anchor in the light into the physical body, we have to let go of this idea of trying to be right. And that's the next stage, because we're going to stay in this. We're going to stay in this for as long as it takes humans to wake up out of this and bring the fifth dimension here, bring heaven on earth. This may take 20, 30, 50, 100 years. It's down to us individually. And so if you're being challenged with crisis right now in your life, with your family, in order to keep on ascending, at some stage, you have got to step out of it and see it as this story playing out, and that you came in here to experience this so that your soul could grow. And the same with the people in your family. This is their chosen journey through life. And when a child gets to 16, they're pretty grown up nowadays, 16-year-olds. And if they're doing everything that you don't want them to do, at some stage you can only give them the information. Like I did with my adult children, you can only give them the information. And most of them don't want to listen. So you have to step back. And you have to take a breath in and go for a walk in nature and just get out of the scene of it, the whole thing. And you have to just remember that part of the ascension process is in the allowing of everybody, every being, every human to go through what they came here to go through, and that we cannot control or change or manipulate or bribe or anything other than love them where they are at. and be willing for them to think we're crazy, to think we're strange, to think we're in a cult, and to be okay with that. And that requires a huge demand on our egos, you know. Ego always wants to defend. Ego always wants to be right. Ego always wants the other to. You know, so many people are saying, when do you think people are going to realise they were wrong? But even having that mindset and that intention is not the energy of awakening. So the more you begin to ascend, and like I said in a live the other day, you know, I struggle still when I see children in the street with masks on. I'm saying child abuse under my tongue, under my breath. Like it still gets me. And I'm working on this compassion. I'm working on this feminine heart. We're all at different levels, all at different stages. But what I have seen today has really opened my eyes up with 3 lots of clients and another one to call tonight. And it's kind of blown my mind today. And just to finish, it's quite interesting because I will read all these later on. Thank you very much. Love you. Oh, bless you, Danielle. Bless you. Bless your heart. It's interesting because for me personally, you know, it's like my eldest son is married, living up north. And through his new extended family, I've met some really lovely people and their friends, and 3 of those people are awake. And it's funny how they sort of gravitated towards me. Like you gravitate towards people that are awake if you're awake. And very often those people have a lot going on in their lives, you know, because we came in with these challenges to support us in her awakening. I wouldn't have awoken to the degree that I did had I not had all the life experiences I had. Because you start to realise that actually we're not in control. We're not actually in control. And I think part of the thing with a lot of you who are listening are light workers and more awake than you give yourself credit for, because the mind will constantly keep you small, And you've got to remember that this is bigger than you. This is bigger than you. What's happening at the moment on this planet is bigger than you. And all you can do is become more of you, which means the ego is going to have to drop. So just to finish, and I'm just giving a little bit of my own personal life, if you like, and what's been going on for me, is that when I had Fluvid, and I was put out for like 7 weeks. It was just flu. For me, but I was very weak. I lost my sense of taste and smell. My big issue, if you like, with having it was I was frightened I'd given it to other people at the wedding that I was at, family wedding, which didn't happen. And also the other issue was having plants to water, a dog that needed watering and feeding. And just the practical help of having supplies bought in, fruit. I lost loads and loads of weight. I look like an Ethiopian. I hope that's PC. Can you say that? I look like an Ethiopian, but I did. And so a couple of weeks ago, I would say I was like 100% better a couple of weeks ago. I just started exercising with weights again, very tiny amount this week, but I'm so ready to get some weights out and exercise. But what happened over that 7 weeks is, after my first husband died 34 years ago, I really got into exercise because I found out what the benefits of exercise were. Then I found out you can get addicted to exercise. And that's when I trained as a Pilates and yoga teacher, because all of my one-to-one clients were constantly telling me all their problems and that. And I realised that the exercise was good for some things, but they always, especially in one-to-ones, wanted to go deeper. And I started realising that these people had a lot of problems. We all have a lot of issues, but we use exercise and drugs and drink and shopping and sex and all of that stuff to avoid feeling our pain, you see. So my whole life, really, I've been my whole adult life, I've been on this path of awakening, like the mind, the body, the emotions, the spirit. It's been my personal fascination. So when I was unwell for about 6 weeks, I lost all this weight and I was eating so healthy that when I started feeling better, I remember now, because I keep saying to people, I've had addictions. I was a smoker for 40 years. I was teaching yoga, teaching on yoga retreats, and I was smoking, you know, like behind the bike shed sort of thing. On retreats, I'd be standing behind the kitchen in the finca in Spain, and I'd be having my roll up. And I knocked that on the head about 7 years ago. I never thought I could, but I realised that I've got rid of all my addictions, but I realised I have a thing with food. I'm an emotional eater. And because I didn't exercise for that 7 weeks and I was eating so healthily, I did go very, very thin. The last couple of weeks, I just realised yesterday, well, I didn't just realise, I knew for the whole 2 weeks that I was eating a lot. I went and bought this sourdough bread we have this beautiful mill that I'd never been to before in Redbourne. If you're local, it's the mill, the Redbourne mill. If you know what it is, put it in the comments. But they do amazing bread, and I just thought, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to go and buy some sourdough bread, and I'd lost loads of weight. And I thought, I'm just going to eat what I want, and I keep my ulcerative colitis under control, and blah blah blah. So everything I've healed against all my specialist recommendations. They're like their jaw drops open when they say to me, you should be ill. You should be really unwell. They try and give me this medicine. I'm like, no, seriously, I'm fine. I don't need it. So I always heal myself naturally. But the last couple of weeks, I can't stop eating bread. Like, I've been eating cakes, bread, egg toast, marmalade on toast, and I've been eating it late into the night. And I know that's no good for me, but I've been doing it. I've been doing it anyway. And I started feeling like my posture was sort of going a bit. I hadn't done any weights or any Pilates or yoga. I was eating loads, and there was this little niggle in my head, but mostly about 5 o'clock in the morning when, I often wake up quite early and I'm in this sort of light dreamy state, and then often I'll go back to sleep. But that's the time when I always used to worry. When I used to smoke, you see, because, oh my God, my lungs would wheeze. I mean, it was terrible, but it was the worry of what I was doing to myself. And when I stopped smoking, that for me was probably the biggest, this sounds pretty weird thing to say. It does sound weird. I'm thinking it's weird, but it was probably the biggest achievement of my life. I never thought I could stop smoking. And it was a very interesting journey for me, because it didn't matter if it was smoking or drinking or eating or whatever. It was an addiction. So when you're eating, if you're hungry, because I have been hungry. The more carbs I eat, the hungrier I get. Anyway, the point of telling you this story is that last night I made a decision that I'm going to start doing my exercises again, and I'm going to cut out all those bloody carbs again and eat really healthy. Because even when I'm eating healthy, sometimes I still eat stuff that's not healthy. Now, for some of you might be thinking, but those of you who get me, those of you who know what I'm talking about, my sister and I would say we're being good or we're not being good. And she's like me. And, even the fact that we had a Hungarian father that was brought up in poverty and didn't have any food, it's like we always finish everything on our plate. There's this, we've brought in from our ancestors through our lineage, we've brought in this kind of lack mentality. And it's the same with food. So, we're all a product of where we've come from. So last night, I knew last night I was going to start going back on keto, because I don't get so hungry when I don't eat carbs. Made the most amazing omelette this morning with everything in it, just amazing, no carbs. And then my day just went freaking crazy. But I've talked about that already, supporting so many people today going through crisis. But coming back to the food, I made a decision last night. I knew that I was going to get back on track. And I was thinking how difficult it is when you have an addiction and you haven't yet stopped that addiction. Because I always knew, for me, if I ever put something that you could smoke, and and I'm talking about the puffer things they do, the vapes and all that, I knew when I stopped smoking tobacco 7 years ago, I could never, ever put anything that took smoke into my throat and my lungs ever again, because I'd tried to give up too many times, and I knew it was that one. And drinkers say the same. Alcoholics say the same. It's that one drink. Now, fortunately for me, because when I was in my dreadful crisis trauma, when I was a 25-year-old widowed mum with 2 children, and I was going through massive trauma and massive crisis, which lasted for so long, I started to exercise. I started eventually, a long time later, to get into healthy food. And eventually, 7 years ago, stopped smoking. And as I became more of who I really was, I didn't need to try and give up my addiction. It just, I was sitting more comfortably in my own skin. And this is the missing point about addiction. And if you want a really great, I've got loads of messages come through. If you want a really great video on addiction, I might just add the word addiction onto this live. If you want a really great a video from YouTube on addiction, it's a TED talk. I'll send it to you. Ask me and I'll put the link down in the comments. Let me know if you want the link to it. And, you know, basically the summary was that addiction is basically lack of connection to self. That's what addiction is. So then when I look back at my own journey of where I've been, where I've come from, and forgiving the part of me that for 2 weeks was going wild on sourdough and rye bread and toast and jam and marmalade and all that, you know, it's easy for me now, because my addiction, my addictive personality might still be lurking around at times, but I can just stop because I've practiced enough. I've seen what happens. I know how it feels to honour myself. I know how it feels to tell myself, even if it's for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, right, okay, enough's enough. This is not good for you. This bread is not good for you. You're feeling a bit slouchy. You're feeling 10 years older. Your posture's dropping. I can have words with myself because I have been practicing this for many decades. So I can very quickly pull myself out. And it occurred to me how it must be and how it was for me to be trying for years and years and years and decades to try and stop an addiction. I seem to have veered into another subject, but actually everything I have said tonight ties up. It's all connected. Because the more that we awaken to our true divinity, which is really what awakening means, what it means to wake up, is to wake from the slumber of the illusion of who you think you are. And we have been born into a world, into a body that is basically, essentially, a complete and utter illusion. You know, we literally dropped from the 5th dimension back into the 3rd dimension to experience this, and now we're ready to go back into the 5th dimension to bring our bodies back into that higher frequency. And things like addictions and stuff are really great opportunities to stop the self-disgust, the self-hatred, and without trying to put anyone down, or without trying to sort of sound like I'm just going to say it anyway. Most people who are into natural health, you would hope, I mean, it hasn't quite played out that way, I've got to say, but most people who are into natural health, who genuinely take care of their mind, their body and their soul and their emotional body are awake. And in order to wake up, you need to go through a journey. You need to go through a journey. Whatever journey it was that your soul contract was, you need to go through that journey. And as you go through that journey and you learn about what it means to become more of who you really are, which most humans haven't done. Most humans won't do. I've got a heart circle. In fact, the whole community of what I learned with authentic communication is actually a very quiet community, because most people are too frightened to meet themselves. Most people are too frightened to access their full potential, to be who they really are. We are so programmed into being small. Like even me, when and every day, I feel like every day I'm waking up more. Like literally every day I feel like I'm waking up more. And you are too. And if you're listening to me now, you are waking up more and more every day, because that's why you're here, because everything is on purpose. And as you start to connect to your light and become more aligned to your authentic self, the more that you will be able to, I want to say share, but the more that your light will shine, and more of you who are listening to this, who are at that place of crisis within your family, what an amazing opportunity for you now to step out of this situation, to have empathy for your families, to understand that they cannot see what they cannot see. Like they literally cannot see what you can see. And so we need to really open our hearts to them and understand, understand. That's the word that we were brought into. That was the word that we were given. Yeah. It's when we stand, because understand means that someone is standing on you. And that's the world we've been born into. When you stand, that when you connect to who you really are as a human being, and you remember, and the first step for you will be to realise, to wake up to what's actually going on the planet and to humanity. That the majority of people are laughing at you, sneering at you, telling you that you're in a cult, telling you that you're crazy, telling you that you're brainwashed. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, that's you. But the next step is to step out of that and see and understand and have empathy for those who cannot see what you can see. That's the next level. That's the next level. And that level of compassion is what's going to pull us up more. And I've kind of talked around this theme all week in a way. And that's kind of where the addiction comes in, because you look, a lot of the people who are at various levels of awakening probably still have some very, very clever addictive behaviours. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because there's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, I had people put me down when I was teaching yoga and smoking tobacco. And, you know, many of you will have addictions. You know, I watched myself pull myself out of this eating addiction for 2 weeks. It wasn't an eating addiction. It wasn't an eating addiction. It was just eating food that I knew wasn't any good for me. Because we all have to cope. As humans, we have to cope. So that's kind of it, really. It's been an incredibly intense day. And yet, and this is where experience comes in. This is where practicing being who you really are. Because the more experiences that come your way, and the more that you find a new way of dealing with them, and the more that you come into your heart and find the compassion, the better it is for everybody. We need to. I did watch Laurie Ladd the other night, and you know, and a few of them talking about how we need to stop this division. And this is our challenge now. This is our challenge. This is how we're gonna pull it off. And if anyone listening, it's been a long one, but if anyone listening knows what's going on in Australia, in Melbourne, there's an amazing woman I follow now and again, and we follow each other actually, and I did ask her if I could interview her and just do a conversation, because I'm really fascinated with Australia. I have very close ties with Australia. And I have lived in and spent time in various states in Australia. And something big's going on today. Hopefully they pull it off with the truckers and the veterans blocking the whole of Australia. So if you've got any news on that, do send me a link. And thanks for listening. What an incredibly powerful time. What an incredibly powerful time this is. And I feel honoured. I feel honoured to be here and really go into your own heart and see if you can find that within you that actually, because it's like watching a crazy show play out. And the more that you realise that, the more you're going to come out of your ego and get caught up in these dramas that are happening. And the more you're going to connect with your own authentic self. Just to finish, if anyone's interested, I'll let you know I have got places left for this Sunday at 7 UK time for a 2.5-hour heart circle, which is an opportunity to get to understand more of the work I do and how to connect more deeply to your authentic self. So drop me a private message if you're interested. And sending big love to all of you. These are really, really challenging times for so many. And I just send you strength, courage, hope, peace, and love. Take care. Night, night.